Hi, I'm Dakota.
And I'm Cody Bettridge.
And we're talking about ABC costing. So traditional costing has been used predominantly by businesses all over the world. It's GAAP conforming, so managers can use on financial statements as well. It's relatively easy to use, and if there are positive numbers showing, management doesn't usually think that it's time to switch to a more intensive costing system. Traditional costing lumps all the indirect costs to the products evenly based on volume and sales. But what happens, for example, in a furniture company that makes the exact same quantity of two different kinds of products that use the same indirect costs like glue, but one product uses twice as much glue as the other? Under traditional costing, these indirect costs would be spread over the two products equally. Under ABC, these types of indirect costs are more accurately allocated to the products that use them. So how does ABC costing actually allocate costs? Through multiple cost pools that managers believe that costs come from. They generally are different for every business. So the steps to ABC is, the first step is you need to select the product for which the business will track costs. The second step is to gather product cost information from all the sources possible. This may include financial statements such as income statements, production reports, and more. It may be necessary to gather some data physically by measuring things related to the products being targeted. After that, step 3 is to arrange all the activities related to costs into direct or indirect costs. These will then more specifically be categorized into costs in the next step. So step 4 is to arrange direct costs into labor and materials. Step 5 is to use the direct costs to create an operating cost formula for each product. Step 6 is to select the cost pools and cost drivers for the costs. For example, if a product needs to be frozen for some time before it is packaged, a cost driver could be time in the freezer, and the cost pool could be packaging preparation. Finally, the last step is to use the cost pools and drivers to calculate what a product costs. So after you've kind of walked through this step, what can you do to use this information? So managers can get a better idea of what products are costing the company the most and the least. They can use this information to try and push certain products that provide the best return on investment. They can see what costs are being incurred by a product and find ways to reduce these costs. If one product consumes more storage space, it may be that a manager could turn to more of a just-in-time production strategy to reduce storage costs. Knowledge is power, and in a business environment that demands efficiency, it's hard to skip over knowing the costs associated with products.
ABC costing is used most in manufacturing since it is difficult to determine where to allocate the cost of a manager's salary. Some of the benefits that ABC costing has is, one, is that it expands the number of cost pools that can be used to assemble overhead costs. 2, it creates new bases for assigning overhead costs to items such that costs are allocated on the basis of the activities that generate costs instead of on volume measures such as machine hours or direct labor costs. ABC system alters the nature of several indirect costs, making costs previously considered indirect such as depreciation, inspection, or power are traced to certain activities. And while there are many benefits to having activity-based costing, there are also many disadvantages that make it costly to a company. Activity-based costing makes it easy to distribute the cost of management's salary, but how accurate is this method? In a study performed by university professors, they found that although implementation of ABC gives a more accurate final cost, due to obligation to define various cost pools and suitable cost drivers for them tanks, it becomes very complex and costly. They further analyzed that ABC's fundamental flaw is that as the overhead cost increases, as the characteristics of the product cost increase, the percentage of error of this costing method increases. From this, we can analyze for ourselves that activity-based costing may not always be the most appropriate thing to do when overhead costs start to increase. So all in all, ABC costing is relatively easy to follow with a step-by-step process that allows accountants and managers to access information quickly and efficiently. Along with accessible information, ABC costing is user-friendly when it comes to interpreting the data. Many times, companies want to know where their costs are going, and being able to interpret the data easily makes for a healthy company and a happy manager. And while there are many advantages and disadvantages to the ABC method, it will always be a sure way of allocating costs for the majority of companies.